Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today I'm going to show you my beginner build for the Magicka Templar, also known as Magplar for the High L DLC patch. This build is capable of pulling over 75k on the parse dummy with an easy beginner friendly rotation. As a part of the beginner setup series, I'll be focusing on a starting rotation gear that are all easily accessible. This build is best suited for those who are interested in starting their group content journey, meaning this is not a leveling guide and assumes you have some sort of access to at least crafted gear at CP 160. For the sake of this theme and to be as new player friendly as possible, I'll be avoiding mythics, arena weapons, trial, or dungeon gear for the initial setup. Furthermore, the rotation for many classes will be simplified. The build specializes in normal group content such as trials, dungeons, and group arenas. This build works great in overland but is not specifically designed for it. Furthermore, I'll be going over some ideas and tips to further progress yourself into mid and end game. Although hybrid builds are some of the strongest builds right now, I'll be focusing on a more traditional setup that either focuses on Magicka or stamina. The reason is it's easier to focus on one resource than trying to manage two. With that being said, here we go. Starting off in the character sheet, I have 64 points into Magicka and I'm running the Thief Mundus. For the race, I am a high elf. I think high elves are probably the best for this type of build, but to be honest, unless you're pushing for max DPS, race doesn't matter too much. So for food, we have a couple options. Best in slot is going to be Clockwork Citrus Fillet, and a cheaper and almost just as good alternative would be Witch Mother's Potent Brew. And lastly, if you're parsing or just need more sustain in general, Ghastly Eyeball is always the go-to. So for potions, we're just going to be using standard Essence of Spell Power. These potions are important because they provide us with 3 major buffs that are important for Magicka DPS. These include Major Prophecy, Major Sorcery, and Major Intellect. Keep in mind though, these potions do cost a little bit to make and or buy. Make sure you have 3 points in the medicinal use from the Alchemy skill line to benefit from their full duration. So for CP, for the blue tree, we're going to be running Wrathful Strikes, Biting Aura, Deadly Aim, and Master at Arms. For the red tree, Sustained by Suffering, Siphoning Spells, Rejuvenation, and Boundless Vitality. So for the gear, we're going to be running 5 pieces of Julianos paired with 5 pieces of Order's Wrath and 2-piece Night Mother. So breaking it down, in the main hand we have a Julianos Dagger, Nirnhone with a flame damage enchant. On the offhand, Charged with a poison damage enchant. On the back bar we have a Julianos Inferno Staff with an increased weapon and spell damage enchant, traded and infused. For the head and shoulders, we have 2 pieces of Night Mother, 1 in light, 1 in medium, both traded in divines with max mag enchant. For the body, we have 5 pieces of Order's Wrath, all in light, traded in divines with max mag enchants. And for the jewelry, we have 3 pieces of Julianos jewelry, all with Bloodthirsty as the trait, and spell damage glyphs as the enchant. So for skills, we'll be running Purifying Light, Puncturing Sweep, Ritual Retribution, Radiant Oppression, Inner Light, and Dawnbreaker. On the back bar, Solar Barrage, Wall of Fire, Blazing Spear, Barbed Trap, Channeled Focus, and Shooting Star. So for the rotation, we're going to be casting all of our back bar dots and then swapping over, casting 1 more skill, and then 1 Purifying Light and 4 Puncturing Sweeps, and then lastly another Purifying Light. So breaking it down, we're going to be starting off with a Solar Barrage, Unstable Wall of Fire, Blazing Spear. This is where you alternate between Channeled Focus or Barbed Trap, Bar Swap, Ritual Retribution, Purifying Light, 4 Puncturing Sweeps, and Purifying Light again. And then you just rinse and repeat that. And at 25%, you can start using your Radiant Oppression instead of Puncturing Sweeps. And then this is when you only recast your Unstable Wall and Blazing Spear and Trap. And lastly, whenever your Ice Comet is ready, you could just drop that whenever. So usually I'd put in a mid-game section, but because Order's Wrath is such a good set, it won't be replaced until we hit closer to endgame. This is where we have a few options. To make this more simple, I'll be focusing on a traditional Magicka setup, wearing light armor. Medium armor is pulling ahead in DPS right now, but managing 2 resources can be quite hard, so I'm not going to include that into this build. So from here, you have a few options. First, I'll talk about body sets. Body sets are basically sets that are worn on the body. This means 5 pieces are active at all times. Furthermore, these sets should ultimately have Minor Slayer to benefit from the extra damage to bosses. Therefore, we realistically only have 2 options. These are Basai from the Trial Rock Grove and Whirl of Depth from the Dread Reef Sail Trial. They're both strong, but Basai requires you to manage your Magicka, while Whirl requires the boss to be semi-stationary. They both have their uses, but Whirl seems to be easier and better option for most situations. Regardless, these are trial sets and running them on normal should be easy and you should work towards getting them if possible. Moving on from here, we have front bar sets. or just sets to pair with either Basai or Whirl. These include Kinra, Pillar of Nirn, Zogvin, and Advancing Yokeda. Out of the list, I think Kinra is the best option, granted you can keep the stacks. Kinra comes from the dungeon Black Drake Villa, Pillar of Nirn comes from Falkreath Hold, Advancing Yokeda comes from Helral Citadel, and Zovgin comes from Frostvault. I'd also like to mention that Zovgin is unique in that it allows us to run a different skill instead of Trap, bringing up a bar slot. And Order's Wrath is actually really good right now, and probably better than Advancing Yokeda. So here's to hoping it doesn't get nerfed. Next is the Mythic and Maelstrom Arena Inferno Staff. Mythics is kind of a pain to get, but they are some of the strongest items in the game. If you're running a Mythic, I'd go for a one-piece Slime Crawl Monster Helm paired with Harpooners. Harpooners is viable for a lot of content and is best in slot for when it is. A good alternative will always be Death Dealer's Fate. I'd also like to quickly mention that Oakensoul Ring is a very viable choice if you want to go the one-bar route. And lastly, for Monster Helms, if you don't want to run a Mythic, you have a few options, but Stormfist, Kjarnar, and Maul the Inferno are my personal picks. So closing thoughts, first off, Deadly, it's a really good set. I did post it in the gear section, but I just wanted to reiterate that it is really good. And on top of that, you don't need to build stacks like Kinra, so it's always a viable option as well, especially if you need to be mobile. This is where I usually say that if you want to be at range, you can use an Inferno staff instead, but Templars rely on their puncturing sweeps to the point where they can't really play at range effectively. And for bar slots, Inner Light is going to be the flex spot if you just want to get rid of that and include whatever you need. I suggest maybe a heal or a shield. And one last thing, I don't think I covered it in the gear section, but I am running all light because of the sustain. And lastly, if you don't have Ice Comment, you can always just run Dawnbreaker instead and you should be good to go. And I think that wraps it up. Thanks for watching the video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below or come join our Discord. If this video helped in any way, please consider subscribing and liking the video. And attached will be a parse and outfit section. And as always, thanks again and see you in the next one.